Hello and welcome to today's fireside chat on the importance of effective subscription management within Microsoft CSP. My name is Carlo Doherty. I'm a principal Microsoft licensing consultant here at Version 1, where I work with our customers to help them understand what their Microsoft license posture is and help them navigate Microsoft contract renewals, as well as helping them stay on top of their license position from a compliance perspective. I'm joined by today on today's call by my colleague William. How are you,
Hi
William?
there. Hi there, Carl. Very good, thank you. So my name is William Nelson. I work alongside Carl in the sound practice and focus on the commercial aspect of the Microsoft licensing offering.
Thanks, William. So an interesting topic. We're back again to talk about
Yeah,
CSP, and I know you've written some good blogs on this topic. CSP, I think probably a good starting point because some of the people who will be viewing this video might not have heard of this Microsoft acronym, but CSP, it stands for the Microsoft Cloud Solution Provider Program. And I think over the last number of years, it's been described as a modern day licensing program from Microsoft. And in effect, what it allowed Microsoft partners to do was to integrate license fulfillment with end-to-end lifecycle managed services, from solutions implementation to support and billing. So bit of a bit of a mouthful. It has been described as a modern day licensing program. It's primarily designed for online services, but it's been around for quite a few years now, and we've seen some evolution of the program over the last number of months in particular. And I think when we look at CSP historically, I've always felt that it had a high degree of flexibility in terms of how customers could acquire online services and certain Microsoft on-premise software. I think I often use the term that it allowed you to pay as you grow or pay as you slow on a monthly basis by default. But that's slightly changed over the last number of months, and I know, William, you've had some experience of that at the coalface, working with customers to help them navigate some of those programmatic changes have taken place. So, like, what probably going back on old ground, these are somewhat old announcements as we're now in August 2022, but it's probably worth kind of having a quick chat about what those changes were.
yeah, no, absolutely, because it was quite a game changer, but things have sort of settled down now, and I think partners in particular ought to know the rules of engagement and the changes that impact customers. And I think the key change was the enforcement of essentially a minimum term agreement. They always were 12 months. Um, Microsoft will state that, but there was no enforcement policy, which meant that customers could reduce a quantity of licenses at any time during that 12 months without any penalty. So they could essentially scale up, scale down accordingly, month on month, um, without without having to pay any sort of early termination fees. So that minimum 12 months term is now enforceable. So if you start a license on the 1st of January of the year, then you're committing to that for the rest of the year, which means the customer has to pay the partner has to pay Microsoft, and there's no room for flexibility within that, unless of course you pay a premium for a monthly committed license term. Um, you can mix and match, so you can have part annual term on the same product title, Office 365 E3, for example, and then you could have a certain percentage which are maintained on a monthly committed term to allow for flexibility, but you pay a premium. And I think that's the fundamental change is the almost like a tie-in or a lock-in to a partner that a customer is now experiencing if they don't pay the premium for monthly committed licenses.
So it's in a way, when I kind of think about this, we've over the last number of years when we've been steering customers that are, suitably qualified or best fit for CSP. We've been kind of navigating away from traditional volume licensing models that, were primarily designed for the on-premise world, 20 odd years ago, or maybe a little bit less than that in some cases. But this kind of change in direction from Microsoft almost kind of feels that we're still modern, but at the same time, we're kind of also starting to look to kind of leverage some of those more kind of traditional annuity-based licensing structures where you're looking at making, well, obviously there's the 1 year commitment which we've seen, and I think there's some talk about being
3 year
there
as
being
well. Yeah,
multi-year commitments.
yeah,
So like, anytime you're making any form of it, if even if it's just a 1 year commitment or a multi-year commitment, you know, governance is then key, because I think, having any form of lock in or being tied down, even if it's a 1 year commitment, we'd often find that they'll just roll over. So I think, it starts to kind of throw up a lot of questions around governance and making sure you have the right level of governance in place around your licensing. Otherwise, that's going to throw up, a variety of different risks that many organizations just won't take into consideration.
yeah. No, completely agree on that. And it's you know, whenever a customer is tied into a fixed term contract, then there is less room for movement that they have on their part. But I mean, aside from, I suppose, the term contracts, and everyone appreciates, I'm sure, that protection of business, and no one wants to see business being cut short if they've already won it. But I mean, besides that, from a license management perspective, what are you seeing any other challenges from the work you do through the sort of the CSP model with customers? Because you're on the coal face, I just sell it, you deliver it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, let me have a think about that one. So, in terms of challenges, I think what we see is, in some cases, some organizations have begun to acquire software licenses through a Microsoft partner that might not necessarily have a depth of expertise around licensing or license management or software asset management. And I think what sometimes that ends up creating are challenges for the customer around. So things like, being proactively on top of consumption, tracking utilization, and being able to identify where there's cost saving measures within your business. So, what we often see is that many organizations will just roll over on their annualized cost or monthly billing and not really question as to what are they using, and is there an opportunity to carve out some of that cost. Within that waste space, we see things like license buffers, where people are buying, excessive number of licenses to meet the demands of joiners, movers, leavers, but then it's never actually properly managed, and so you've got these license buffers just sitting there underutilized. In simple terms, inactive users or subscription types not being tracked and harvested back and given to other users in the business. And then we see, new requests come into the business, and then more licenses are stocked on top of existing licenses that could have actually been repurposed elsewhere, and therefore avoiding any associated cost. And then, poorly profiled requirements is also an issue. Sometimes we'll see organizations will, acquire a specific SKU without really fully understanding, all of the specific features that it's going to give, and are all of those specific features actually required, or is there an alternative approach that can be utilized? And then I think the last kind of challenge that I would see, and again, this really relates to organizations that aren't proactively managing their subscriptions within CSP, is good old fashioned license compliance, right? So with regards, sometimes there's a misconception that the cloud eliminates all license compliance issues, and that's not necessarily always the case. We have situations in play where we see organizations have acquired a blend of subscriptions, and sometimes the features between those subscriptions aren't always gated. So sometimes you might see a user with a lower feature subscription gain access to features from a more expensive subscription type. So license compliance is also another challenge that needs to be addressed and focused and managed accordingly. Um, so yeah, I guess, there's quite a few there. There's quite a few
Yeah,
things to consider.
yeah. I mean, the challenges that you see on the coal face, as we call it, as such. So, but I suppose that's where the importance of a CSP partner, and the role that they play with the customers. So that's where we need to look at what's good, what's not, and what's best for the customer. and for example, I always believe that communication is key. So good account management with consistent updates, like reporting, preempting changes by communicating that back to the customer and understanding what their challenges may be and what the objectives they want to achieve. It might be a new rollout of a software application, or it might be rollout of new devices, or digital transformation, all that sort of good stuff. But by understanding what they're trying to achieve, what they're planning to do, then we can help plan and align what licensing might look like in the future for them, so we can plan for change when change can happen. So because transacting subscriptions as a CSP partner, it ought to just be seen as like a facilitator. So it shouldn't be seen as that margin, sort of the main source of income for a partner. The margins need to be made, but I suppose the real value comes from really how the technology can be best placed to meet their business needs, rather than just seeing it as a click per month type scenario.
So I think that that proactive piece is obviously key. And
Yeah.
as I said before, avoiding a situation where you're just rolling over on the license just for the sake of it. Question and
Definitely.
query everything, and otherwise you're opening yourself up to to unnecessary cost, right?
Yeah.
So we're coming to the end of this fireside chat, William.
Mm.
Okay, if I was to throw it out there, at a minimum,
Mm.
if you were talking to a customer today around managing their CSP, any quick tips on what you would recommend they need to do as they approach the anniversary of their CSP agreement?
Yeah. Well, there's two. It might seem obvious, but it is so important when trying to impact change. So it's knowing the exact date of the anniversary of the agreement, and being able to work backwards from there, because essentially beyond that date, there's very little that the customer or the partner can actually do to rectify or remediate any changes that should have been made after that time. So it's the date of the anniversary as far as for the subscriptions is concerned, and also the notice period that might be needed to be given to the partner themselves. Some will have no sort of notice period. Some will have 30 days, 45 days, 90 days, who knows? But that's between the customer and the partner, and not the customer and Microsoft. So I think first thing is know the exact date of your anniversary, and secondly is know what sort of terms and notice periods that are needed to be given before any change can be impacted.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip, actually, because as we've seen in the traditional world of volume licensing, where organizations had some form of an anniversary, like an enterprise agreement true up, or some form of compelling event like that, or renewal, we often saw in that space a lot of organizations coming to the table late in the day with
Yeah.
regards to what it is. And if there's, as you're saying, if you're not aware of those key dates in your contract life cycle, you could see yourself having to roll over on spend for another 12 months, or continue to use a partner that you might actually want to move away from
Yeah.
for another 12 months. So I think that's really, really solid advice.
And I suppose I'll throw that one back at you in terms of, I suppose, what sort of advice for the effective subscription management within CSP? What
So
would
very
be
quickly,
your starter for 10?
very quickly, I think, consumption, right? So benchmark consumption quarterly at a minimum, and look to implement the cost saving recommendations that you might find from that analysis, or any risk management recommendations. I see a lot of organizations wait until the end of the year. All you're really doing when you're doing that is you're letting waste accumulate over a 12-month period. So this should be an iterative process where you're harvesting licenses and eliminating risk on a quarterly basis at a minimum. So, benchmark consumption quarterly, I think that's key. I said it earlier on in the chat today. Don't assume cloud equals license compliance, and also don't assume that the cloud removes the need for proactive license management. Involve what I would say, if it's an internal person that's got the right skill set, or if you need to bring in external skills, but do involve, should I say, a skilled licensing professional to help you along the way, from a cost management perspective, but also from a license management perspective. It will save you a lot of time, effort, and ultimately money as well. So I think that's pretty much about all we were going to cover off in today's brief session. Um, watch out for some of our upcoming videos on all things Microsoft licensing. Um, publish content on a regular basis through our Medium blogs. So keep an eye out for some very interesting topics on a monthly basis that we post. If you do have any queries, questions off today's session, do feel free to reach out to the SAM practice at version 1. You can reach us via www.version1.com/SAM, where you can post any questions or queries you might have to the team, which we'd be delighted to field. So until the next fireside chat, William, thanks for your
Yep.
input today. Some
Thank you.
really useful nuggets of information there, and
Yeah.
chat to you soon.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.